Hi, everybody. It's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about naming things. What I mean by that is when you start to put together a game, you're going to have to come up with so many names. You're going to have to name the game, you're going to have to name items in the game, places in the game, other people in the game. If it's a space game, you're going to have to come up with, fanciful technology names and names for other aliens. If it's a fantasy game, you're going to have to come up with magical sounding names and names that describe magical processes, like, oh no, the wizard has placed wards on all of the glyphed stones, whatever. What I want to talk about is how to come up with those names. And I think this process is something that's often overlooked. And I'm going to share a couple examples of things, well known, I think, that are just off. I'm going to talk about how I did it. Now, I'm going to start, though, with saying I'm kind of up and down with names, especially proper names. If you watch this channel, you know that I'm really, really bad at remembering names. I forget my friends' names and my colleagues' names, actors' names, names of movies, names of games, names of songs. I'm bad with names. I have some examples that I've talked about, like when we first put together the new system for Fallout, and I was like, oh, good, it spells A-slips, until someone came along and said, how about special? More recently, when I've been doing my tour updates, I keep calling it Fresnel because it looks like Fresnel, and I've never heard anyone pronounce it that I can remember, and I keep getting corrected by people that saying it's Fresnel, that the S is silent, and I'm like, okay, and then I forget it again. I will probably misname it again. I actually found out that I probably have something called anomic aphasia because there is apparently a known condition where it's very difficult for people to remember proper names. Maybe I have it, maybe I don't. But guess what? That doesn't mean I didn't come up with a lot of proper names in my games. So I'm going to talk about that. Now, Fallout, I didn't do a lot of that. In fact, I would probably lay the names for most things in the first Fallout on Scott Campbell, the original designer. He named so many things. He had notes and he would draw sketches and stuff. We had Junktown and the Hub and the Glow. Some of these were done super, super early. My notes show these being done just a few months after we started. And I have a whole video on how we came up with the name of Fallout, that we had a brainstorming session and we had a bunch of names and we couldn't decide. And Brian Fargo came up with the name Fallout and said, you guys should be Fallout. I don't think I named a single place. I'm not even sure I named an item. I might have named the vault. But a single place name, I think until Fallout 2, I came up with the Den, which was short for the Den of Iniquity. I thought that was clever. I think I came into my own in Arcanum. Arcanum is a place where I named a ton of things. I named items and spells. I came up with the subtitle of Steamworks and Magic Obscura. I named a lot of locations. Tarrant, Vendigroth, the Stonewall Range, the Glimmering Forest. Those are all out of my cranium. I didn't do Shrouded Hills or Isle of Despair. In fact, I think with the exception of Glimmering Forest, if a place was named adjective noun, I probably didn't come up with that. Not that I think that's a wrong way of doing it, and I'll talk about that. It's just not how I thought about making names. I think when you come up with a name, most names are okay. Some names just really nail the vibe of the game. And then similarly, you can really screw up. The two biggest ones I remember, I didn't do a Google search. I just thought to myself, have you ever just stopped when you were watching a show or a movie and went, wow, that's a bad name? And I remembered two very clearly. The first one was Babylon 5. I love that TV show. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. However, the first time they're like talking about the shadows and that they come from the mysterious planet Zahadum, I literally laughed out loud. And this was live television, so I couldn't pause it. And I just remember I was watching it with a group and I went, that's the dumbest name ever. And somebody looked over me and went, isn't that Lord of the Rings? And I'm like, yeah. It was a bad name. It didn't fit the genre. It didn't fit the tone. It was just a bad name. Sorry, Straczynski, that was a bad name. And then similarly, something happened when I was watching Matrix. And at this time, I was watching it at home. And they talked about they all lived in the real world in an underground city named Zion. And I just paused it and I was like, that is the dumbest name. I get what it means. It's like, a holy place, a guarded place, a secret place. But it has so much connotation that has nothing to do with the Matrix and its world that it kind of drags all these connotations into something that has nothing to do with it. Which is how I want to get into talking about how I recommend that you name things. When you're trying to think of names for a game you're making, try to think of genres. Like what genre your game is: sci-fi, fantasy, cyberpunk, atomic, post-nuclear. And then think of movies, books, tabletop role-playing games, other video games that have names in them that you like. Think of them, write them down, Google search and write down the ones you like, and that will give you kind of a target space. And then you can have a brainstorming session, because I love my brainstorming sessions, and you can tell people, I want to come up with names like this. Now, I mentioned earlier, I'm not really a big fan of adjective noun. They have their places. I thought Shrouded Hills sounded nice in Arcanum. I think Roseway sounded nice in The Outer Worlds. The problem with them is they work for anything. They work for any genre. And because of that, they're really generic. They're very... If I just told you the name of one of those places, you probably couldn't guess the genre of the game. And that's why I thought Zahadum was dumb for Babylon 5. And I think generic adjective noun names, they're generic. It works if you're trying to fill out the map. But I wouldn't make all of your names like that. I wouldn't even make most of your names like that. That's just something to steer away from. The last recommendation I have is... think about how you're having people in your game talk. If you've already gotten some narrative designers on and you've agreed on a tone and sound, I don't know what the word for it is, of how people speak, you want the names to follow that. So if you're making a fantasy game and people are all like, thou must go to the, tomb of decay and find the evil necromancer, that's great. What you don't want to say is, thou must travel to the glowy tomb and take on the super rad necromancer. It's like, what? That just does not belong. It's wrong. So think about how people are speaking. Think about other names you've already put in that you like. Names for items, names for abilities or skills or spells. And try to make sure that all of those fit in the same space, because that's something that's going to cause a kind of dissonance in your players if your names don't all come from the same space. And they should point to your genre. They should help indicate the genre. It's okay if some of them are generic, but if most of them are generic, I think you got a problem. So that's most of my recommendations, but I'm going to throw one in here that's just personal. Can we all just give the name Kane and variations on Kane? Can we give that a break? Can we just not name things that anymore? Because, yeah, it gets my attention, but I made a whole video about how I'm kind of over that. So, thanks. And I hope this helps if you're trying to come up with names for your game.